The throne room was silent. Princess stood completely still, her violet eyes wide with shock. She could not believe what her mother had just told her. The words hung in the air like poison and felt her heart's beating faster in her chest. "You will marry a human," Empress had said, just like that, as if it was nothing, as if she had asked her daughter to attend a simple dinner or wear a new dress. His hands trembled at her sides. She was a princess of the empire. Her people had sailed between the stars when humans were still living in caves. They lived for 2,000 years. They could read minds. They could bend light with their thoughts. Their ships were made of living crystal, and their cities floated above clouds of pure energy. And humans were small. Humans were weak. Humans died after 80 or 90 years like candles blown out by the wind. They could not read thoughts. They could not survive in space without heavy suits and clumsy machines. Their ships were ugly boxes of metal that burned dirty fuel and left trails of smoke across the stars. "Mother," said, her voice shaking, "why must I marry a human?" Empress sat upon her throne of white crystal. She was old even by standards. Her hair was the color of moonlight and her eyes held the wisdom of centuries. She looked at her daughter with an expression could not understand. It was not anger. It was not disappointment. It was something else, something like worry. "The Terran Federation has asked for an alliance," the Empress said calmly. "This marriage will seal the bond between our peoples." "But why?" stepped forward, her silver robes swirling around her feet. "We do not need them. We are stronger. We are smarter. We are better in every way. What could humans possibly offer us?" The Empress was quiet for a long moment. Then she rose from her throne and walked down the steps toward her daughter. Her movements were slow and graceful, like water flowing over stone. She stopped in front of and placed a gentle hand on her cheek. "You do not understand humans," she said softly. "That is not your fault. You have never met one. You have only read reports and watched recordings. But I have met them, my child. I have seen what they can do. And until you understand what humans truly are, you will never know why this marriage must happen." Pulled away from her mother's touch. "Then tell me, explain it to me." But the Empress shook her head. "Some things cannot be explained. They must be experienced. You will meet your future husband in one lunar cycle. His name is Daniel Carter. He is a commander in the Terran fleet. He is considered one of their finest officers." "One of their finest," repeated bitterly. "And what does that mean for a human? That he can tie his shoes without help, that he remembers to breathe." The Empress's voice turned sharp. "You will show respect. This is my command and you will obey it." The princess lowered her head, but her fists remained clenched at her sides. "Yes, mother." That night could not sleep. She lay in her bed of woven starlight and stared at the ceiling, where tiny crystals glowed like distant galaxies. Her mind was racing with anger and confusion, and something that felt almost like fear. She called for her handmaiden, a young woman named, was loyal and kind, and she had served since they were both children. "Bring me everything we have on humans," ordered. "Every report, every study, every recording. I want to know everything about these creatures." Bowed and hurried away. She returned an hour later with a data crystal containing thousands of files, spent the rest of the night reading through them. She learned that humans came from a small blue planet called Earth. It was a wet world of oceans and forests, nothing like the crystal mountains and floating cities of the. Humans had only discovered space travel 500 years ago. In the long history of the galaxy, that was nothing. It was like a baby taking its first steps. She learned about human wars. They fought each other constantly. They killed millions of their own kind over land, over resources, over ideas. They were violent and chaotic and unpredictable. They could not even agree on how to govern themselves. Some humans lived under kings. Some lived under elected leaders. Some lived under no leaders at all. She learned about human bodies. They were fragile things of soft flesh and brittle bone. They needed to eat several times a day. They needed to sleep for hours every night. They could be killed by temperature changes, by tiny invisible creatures called germs, by falls from small heights, by 100 different accidents that would barely scratch her. And yet, as read deeper into the files, she began to notice something strange. The reports spoke of humans with a certain caution. The military files used words like unpredictable and dangerous. The diplomatic files warned officers to never underestimate human determination. Why would anyone need to warn the mighty about such weak creatures? Found a section about human history that made her pause. It described something called the War from 300 years ago. They had been one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. They had conquered system after system, destroying anyone who stood against them. Even the had prepared for the possibility of defeat. But then the humans had gotten involved. The file did not explain why. Humans had no alliance with the at that time. They had no reason to fight, but they had come anyway with their ugly metal ships and their primitive weapons. The file ended there. The rest of the information was classified at the highest level. Only the Empress herself could access it. Set down the data crystal and stared out her window at the stars. Somewhere out there, on a small ship made of steel and wire, a human man named Daniel Carter was traveling toward her. In one lunar cycle, she would meet him. In time, she would marry him. The thought made her stomach turn with disgust. But somewhere deep inside her, in a place she did not want to acknowledge, there was also a tiny spark of curiosity. What was it about humans that made her mother, the most powerful woman in 3 galaxies, treat them with such respect? Did not know the answer yet, but she was determined to find out. The human ship arrived on the 31st day. Watched it descend through the purple clouds from the observation deck of the royal palace. It was exactly as ugly as she had imagined. A gray box of metal with small windows and exhaust ports that glowed orange with heat. It looked like something a child might build from scrap parts and call a toy. Beside her made a small sound of surprise. "It is so simple," she said. "Simple is a kind word," replied coldly. "Primitive is more accurate." But even as she spoke, felt her curiosity growing stronger. The ship may have been ugly, but it had traveled across half the galaxy to reach her world. It had passed through dangerous space, through asteroid fields and radiation storms, through territories controlled by pirates and hostile species. And it had arrived on time, not 1 day late. The landing pad filled with guards and diplomats as the ship touched down. Steam hissed from its cooling engines. A door opened on its side, and a ramp extended to the ground. The first humans to emerge were soldiers. They wore simple gray uniforms and carried weapons on their hips. They moved with careful steps, their eyes scanning the crowd for threats. They were smaller than, shorter and less graceful, but there was something in the way they held themselves that found difficult to describe. They looked ready for what she did not know. Then Daniel Carter stepped out of the ship. Had seen pictures of him in the files, but pictures did not capture the reality. He was tall for a human, with dark hair cut short and gray eyes that seemed to notice everything at once. His face was calm and friendly, but there was a sharpness behind his expression, like a blade hidden in a silk cloth. He walked down the ramp and stopped before the officials. Then he did something that surprised everyone watching. He pressed his right hand to his chest and bowed low in the traditional greeting of respect. "I am honored to stand on your world," he said, and he said it in perfect. Blinked. The language was considered one of the most difficult in the galaxy. It had sounds that human throats should not be able to produce. Yet Daniel spoke it smoothly, with only the smallest accent. "He learned our language," whispered, clearly impressed. Said nothing, but she felt the first tiny crack appear in the wall of her prejudice. The formal dinner that evening was held in the Crystal Hall, where the walls themselves sang soft music when touched by light. Sat at the head of the table beside her mother, watching Daniel Carter from across the room. He moved among the nobles with ease, speaking to each of them in their own language, asking questions about their culture and history. He never bragged about himself or his people. He only listened and learned. Eventually, he made his way to seat. He bowed again, that same respectful gesture, and smiled. "Princess," he said, "I have heard much about you. They say you are the finest mind in the Empire." "They say many things about humans too," replied coolly. "Not all of them kind." Daniel's smile did not fade. "I would expect nothing less. Our peoples are very different. It will take time to understand each other." "Do you believe we can ever truly understand each other?" asked. She meant it as a challenge, but Daniel seemed to take it as an honest question. "I believe we can try," he said, "and sometimes trying is enough." They talked for hours, tested him with difficult topics, expecting him to stumble or reveal his ignorance. She asked about philosophy, about the nature of consciousness and the meaning of existence. Daniel did not pretend to know the answers, but he engaged with each question thoughtfully, offering human perspectives that were different from anything had considered before. She asked about war, expecting him to speak of glory and conquest. Instead, he spoke of sacrifice and loss. He told her about friends he had buried, about decisions he had made that still haunted him in the night. There was no pride in his voice, only sadness and acceptance. "You speak of war as if it is a tragedy," said, confused. "Yet humans fight more wars than any other species." "That is exactly why we know it is a tragedy," Daniel replied. "We have learned its cost many times over." When the dinner ended, returned to her chambers feeling strangely unsettled. Daniel Carter was not what she had expected. He was not stupid or crude or arrogant. He was thoughtful and respectful and surprisingly wise for someone whose life would end in a mere few decades. But it was what happened later that night that truly changed thinking. Came to her chambers after midnight, her face pale with shock. "Princess," she said breathlessly, "I have just learned something about Commander Carter's journey here." "What is it?" "His ship was attacked 3 days before they reached our system. Raiders from the Outer Rim. 6 enemy vessels against 1 Terran ship." Frowned, attacked, but the ship looked undamaged. "They fought them off," said. "The humans fought off all 6 ships. The reports say they used tactics the raiders had never seen before. Unpredictable maneuvers, impossible risks. They flew their ship directly into the enemy formation and destroyed 2 vessels before the raiders even understood what was happening. The rest fled." Felt something cold move through her chest, and Commander Carter's voice dropped to a whisper. He was injured, a fractured arm, burns on his shoulder and back. The ship's doctor wanted him to rest for weeks, but he refused. He said the arrival date was set and he would not dishonor your people by being late. Stared at her handmaiden in silence. Daniel Carter had sat across from her for hours, speaking and smiling and answering her questions. He had shown no sign of pain, no hint of discomfort. He had hidden his injuries completely, simply because he did not want to appear weak or unreliable. She thought about what it would take for it to do the same, to hide such pain, to function perfectly while suffering in silence. It would require incredible willpower. It would require a strength that had nothing to do with muscles or weapons or technology. For the first time in her life, began to wonder if she had completely misunderstood what strength really meant. She did not sleep that night. She sat by her window and watched the stars, thinking about a human man who had crossed the galaxy with a broken arm and burns on his flesh, just to meet a princess who had looked down on him before he even arrived. And she began to feel something she had never expected to feel. Shame. The weeks that followed changed everything believed about humans. She told herself that she was simply studying Daniel Carter, learning about the creature she would be forced to marry, gathering information like any good princess should, but deep inside she knew the truth. She was drawn to him, not by attraction, not yet, but by something more powerful, by a mystery she could not solve. Every day brought new surprises. She watched Daniel train with the warriors in the practice halls. The warriors were taller, stronger, faster. They had trained for centuries. They could read his movements before he made them, yet Daniel never quit. He was knocked down again and again, and every time he stood back up, his body was covered in bruises. His muscles shook with exhaustion, but he kept fighting until the training session ended. "Why do you not yield?" one of the warriors asked him after a particularly brutal match. "You cannot win, you must know this." Daniel wiped blood from his lip and smiled. "Winning is not always the point," he said. "Sometimes the point is to show that you will not give up, that no matter how many times you knock me down, I will always stand again." The warrior had no response to that. Neither did who had been watching from the shadows. She saw other things too, small moments that revealed more than any report or file ever could. She saw Daniel kneeling beside a young servant girl who had accidentally spilled wine on his uniform during a formal reception. The girl was terrified. In society, such mistakes could mean severe punishment, but Daniel simply helped her clean up the mess and told her it was nothing to worry about. He spoke to her kindly, like she was a person and not a servant. When she tried to apologize again, he just laughed and said that he had made far bigger messes in his life. She saw him staying awake late into the night, studying history and customs. His quarters were filled with books and data crystals. He read everything he could find, trying to understand the people he would soon join. He practiced their language until his pronunciation was nearly perfect. He memorized the names of noble houses, the dates of important events, the traditions of marriage ceremonies. "He works harder than any diplomat I have ever seen," observed one evening. "He treats this marriage as if it truly matters to him." "Perhaps it does," replied quietly, and she realized that she was beginning to hope that it did. But the change in her heart was not complete until the night she confronted her mother again. She found the Empress in her private chambers, sitting before a window that looked out over the endless sky. Seemed tired, older than had ever seen her. The weight of ruling an empire for 800 years was written on her face. "Mother," said softly, "I need to understand." The Empress did not turn around. "What do you need to understand, my daughter?" "Why you fear them, the humans," sat down beside her mother. "I have watched Daniel Carter for weeks now. He is impressive in his own way, but he is still just one man, one fragile, short-lived man. Why does the Council speak of humans in whispers? Why did you arrange this alliance with such urgency?" Was silent for a long time. Then she stood and gestured for to follow her. They walked through the quiet corridors of the palace until they reached a place had not visited since she was a child. The Hall of Memory. It was a vast chamber filled with crystalline archives, each one containing the recorded history of the civilization. Millions of years of knowledge, preserved in light and stone. The Empress activated one of the archives. The air filled with a holographic projection showing scenes from 300 years ago. "The Dominion," said, "do you remember what you learned about them?" "They were conquerors," replied. "They destroyed 12 star systems in a single decade. Their warriors felt no fear, no pain. They were considered unstoppable." "They were unstoppable," the Empress corrected. "No force in the galaxy could defeat them, not even us. We prepared for the end of our empire. We made plans to evacuate our core worlds. We accepted that we might become refugees scattered across the stars." The projection shifted, saw images of the fleet, a massive armada of dark ships that blotted out the light of stars. And then, appearing from the edge of the projection, she saw something else. Human ships, small, crude, impossibly outmatched. "The humans had only known the for 20 years, continued. "They had no treaty with us, no obligation, they owed us nothing, but they came anyway." Why breathed? Because they believed it was right. Because they could not stand by and watch innocent species be destroyed. Because that is simply what humans do. The projection showed the battle, watched in stunned silence as human vessels charged directly into the lines. They used themselves as shields to protect transport ships full of refugees. They rammed enemy carriers with their own bodies still inside. They deployed weapons that should have been impossible for their technology level, weapons they had invented in desperation over just a few months. The battle lasted for 17 hours. By the end, half the human fleet was destroyed. Thousands of their people were dead, but the armada had been broken. "They won," whispered. "No," her mother said. "They refused to lose. There is a difference." The projection faded. The hall of memory fell silent. "I do not understand," Hal said. "They were weaker. They were fewer. How did they defeat an enemy that we could not?" Empress turned to face her daughter. Her eyes were filled with something finally recognized. Not fear, not worry, respect. "Because humans do not fight the same way we do," she said. "We calculate odds, we measure risks, we retreat when victory seems impossible. But humans do not think like that. When they believe in something, they will fight for it beyond all reason, beyond all hope. They will sacrifice everything they have and everyone they love simply because they refuse to surrender." She placed her hands on shoulders. "That is why we need them, my daughter. Not because they are strong in the ways we understand, but because they are strong in ways we cannot imagine. And in a universe full of dangers, that kind of strength is more valuable than all the crystal ships and ancient wisdom in the galaxy." Left the Hall of Memory with a new understanding in her heart. She finally knew why her mother had arranged this marriage. She finally understood what humans really were. And for the first time, she was not afraid of her future. She was excited by it. The wedding was 1 week away when the attack came. Was sleeping in her chambers when the first explosion shook the palace. She threw off her blankets and ran to the window. Outside, she could see fires burning in the courtyard. Guards were running in every direction. Alarms screamed through the crystal halls. Burst through the door, her face white with terror. "Princess, you must hide. There is a coup. High Commander has turned against the crown." Felt ice spread through her veins. Was the leader of the conservative faction in the military. He had always opposed the alliance with humans. He believed that other species were beneath that mixing with them would weaken the empire. Had never liked him, but she never imagined he would dare to challenge the Empress directly. "My mother said, where is my mother?" Silence told her everything she needed to know. "They have taken her," whispered. "Controls the throne room. He has demanded that you surrender yourself and that the human delegation be executed. If you refuse, he will kill the Empress at dawn." His hands trembled, but not with fear, with anger, with a burning fury that she had never felt before in her long life. "Where is Daniel?" she asked. "The human quarters are under siege. Soldiers have surrounded the building, but they have not breached it yet. The humans are holding them off." Grabbed a communication device and tried to contact Daniel. The connection was weak and filled with static, but after a moment his voice came through. "Are you safe?" "I am safe for now. Daniel, they have my mother. They are going to kill her unless I surrender." "I know," Daniel said. His voice was calm, steady, like he was discussing the weather instead of a life-or-death crisis. "We are working on a plan." "There is no plan," said desperately. "Has hundreds of soldiers. You have only a handful of Marines. You cannot fight your way through." There was a pause on the other end of the connection. When Daniel spoke again, his voice had changed. It was harder now, sharper, like a blade being drawn from its sheath. "We do not need to fight through hundreds," he said. "We just need to reach the throne room is the key. If he falls, his followers will scatter. I have seen it happen before. Cut off the head and the body dies." "Daniel, that is impossible. The throne room is in the center of the palace. You will never reach it." His voice softened. "Trust me, please, get somewhere safe and wait. I will bring your mother back to you, I promise." The connection went dead. Waited in an underground bunker with a small group of loyal guards. The minutes felt like hours. She could hear distant sounds of fighting, explosions and energy blasts that echoed through the stone walls. She prayed to the ancient gods of her people, gods she had not believed in since she was a child. Then the sounds of battle grew closer. There was shouting in the corridors above, footsteps running, a door being smashed open. Grabbed a weapon from one of the guards and pointed it at the entrance to the bunker. If soldiers had found her, she would not go without a fight. But it was not soldiers who came through the door. It was Daniel Carter. His uniform was torn and burned. Blood ran down the side of his face from a wound on his forehead. Behind him were 4 human Marines and 3 guards who had joined their cause. "We need to move," Daniel said. "Now, I have found a path to the throne room, but we do not have much time." Did not hesitate. She followed him into the smoke-filled corridors of her own palace, running through halls she had walked peacefully for centuries. Everything was chaos. Bodies lay on the ground. Walls had crumbled from explosions. The beautiful crystal that had sung with light now lay shattered on the floor like broken dreams. The humans moved differently than anyone had ever seen. They did not hesitate. They did not calculate. They flowed through the battle like water through cracks in stone, always moving, always adapting. When one of them fell wounded, the others did not stop to mourn. They pressed forward, knowing that stopping meant death for everyone. They communicated without speaking. Hand signals, glances, small nods. They had no telepathy, yet they seemed to know exactly what each other was thinking. It was as if they had become a single creature with many bodies, all moving toward the same goal. They reached the throne room doors, had posted 20 guards outside. Daniel looked at his tiny team and smiled. 20-8, he said. "I have had worse odds." And then they attacked. Fought beside them. She had trained in combat for centuries, but she had never experienced anything like this. The humans were everywhere at once, moving faster than seemed possible for their fragile bodies. They took wounds that should have stopped them and kept fighting. One Marine was shot in the leg and continued to advance, crawling on the floor while firing his weapon. Another took a blade to the shoulder and simply switched his gun to his other hand. When the throne room doors finally opened, only a handful of his elite guards remained. The Empress knelt in the center of the room, her hands bound, but her eyes burning with defiance. Turned to face Daniel. He was a massive warrior, 300 years old, covered in scars from 100 battles. "You cannot win, human," he said. "You are nothing. Your entire species is nothing." Daniel raised his weapon. "Then you have nothing to fear." They fought. It was brief and brutal, was stronger and faster, but Daniel was something else entirely. He moved like he had already accepted death, like his life meant nothing compared to the goal in front of him. He took a blade across his ribs. He took a blow to his already injured arm, but he did not stop. He did not slow down. When finally fell, Daniel was standing over him, bloody and broken but alive. Ran to her mother and freed her from her bonds. Then she turned to Daniel, who had collapsed against a pillar. His face was pale. His breathing was shallow. Blood soaked through his uniform from a dozen wounds. She knelt beside him and cradled his head in her lap. "Why?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. "Why would you risk everything for us? We are not your people." Daniel looked up at her with fatting eyes. He reached up and touched her face with a trembling hand. "You are my people now," he said softly. Then his eyes closed, and his body went limp. Screamed for the healers. They came running, and they worked through the night to save him. The medical technology was advanced beyond anything humans had ever created. But even they marveled at the damage Daniel had survived, at the punishment his fragile body had endured. By morning he was stable, and had not left his side for a single moment. Daniel woke 3 days after the battle, was sitting beside his bed when his eyes finally opened. For a moment he looked confused, like he did not know where he was or how he had gotten there. Then he saw her face and he smiled. "Did we win?" he asked. His voice was weak, barely more than a whisper. Laughed through her tears. Yes, you foolish human, we won, is dead. His followers have surrendered, my mother is safe. The Empire is at peace. Good, Daniel tried to sit up, then winced and fell back against the pillows. How long was I unconscious? 3 days. The healers said they had never seen a body so damaged still hold onto life. They called it impossible. Daniel smiled again, that same calm smile he always wore. Humans are stubborn. We do not like to give up. I noticed. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Through the window, could see the twin moons rising over the mountains. The palace was being repaired. The gardens were being replanted. Life was returning to normal. But nothing was normal for any more. Everything had changed. I used to despise your people, she said quietly. I thought you were weak, primitive, beneath us in every way. I wondered why my mother would force me to marry such a creature. Daniel listened without interrupting. But I was wrong, continued. I was so very wrong. I have lived for 600 years and I have never met anyone as strong as you. Not strong in body but strong in something else. Something I do not have a word for. Spirit, Daniel offered. Some humans call it spirit. Spirit tasted the word. It felt right. Yes, spirit, you have it in such abundance. You burn with it. Every human I have met burns with it. She took his hand in hers, careful not to disturb the bandages that covered his wounds. I do not want to marry you because my mother commanded it, she said. I want to marry you because there is no one else in the universe I would rather stand beside. You have shown me what true strength looks like, and I want to learn more. I want to spend the rest of my life learning from you. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. I should warn you, the rest of my life will not be very long by your standards. 60 years, maybe 70 if I am lucky. That is nothing to someone who has already lived 6 centuries. Then we will make every day count, said. We will fill those years with so much life that they will feel like an eternity. The wedding took place 2 weeks later, beneath the twin moons in a garden filled with flowers that glowed in colors no human had ever seen. Thousands of guests attended, from both the Empire and the Terran Federation. It was the largest celebration in 300 years. Wore a gown of silver that sparkled like starlight. Daniel wore the deep blue uniform of the Terran fleet, with a small crystal pinned above his heart. When it came time to speak their vows, surprised everyone. She spoke in the human language, English, which she had been secretly studying for months. Her pronunciation was not perfect, but her meaning was clear. I promise to stand beside you, she said, looking into Daniel's gray eyes. In joy and in sorrow, in peace and in war, for as long as we both shall live. And when your time comes, when your brief candle finally burns out, I will carry your memory in my heart for the rest of my days. You will never be forgotten. This I swear on the light of 1,000 stars. Daniel replied in perfect, I promise to give you everything I am, my strength, my courage, my love. I will hold nothing back. I will waste no moment. Every heartbeat I have left belongs to you. When they kissed, the crowd erupted in cheers, and human together, celebrating a union that no one had thought possible. That night, alone in their chambers, finally asked the question that had lived in her heart since the beginning of everything. Tell me, she said softly, lying beside him in the darkness. Tell me what makes humans the way you are. How do creatures who live such short lives become so unbreakable? How do you find such strength when you have so little time? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out and pressed her hand against his chest, where his heart beat in a steady rhythm. Do you feel that? He asked. Your heartbeat, yes. It will stop one day. Not centuries from now like yours, just decades. Maybe sooner. Every human knows this from the moment we are old enough to understand death. We know that our time is limited. We know that everything we love, everything we build, everything we achieve will one day end. Felt her own heart's ache with sorrow. How do you bear it? We do not bear it, Daniel said. We use it. Knowing that time is short makes every moment precious. Knowing that we will lose everything makes us hold to what we have. We love fiercely because we know love will not last forever. We fight recklessly because we know we have nothing to lose but our lives. We protect the people we care about with everything we have, because we know we will not get a second chance. He turned to face her, his gray eyes shining in the moonlight. You asked me why I risked my life for your mother, for your people. The answer is simple. Once I decided you were mine, there was nothing I would not do to protect you. That is what it means to be human. We do not hold back. We cannot hold back, because we know that tomorrow might never come. Understood at last. She finally had the answer to the question she had asked her mother so many weeks ago. You burn so brightly, she whispered, because you burn so briefly. Yes, Daniel said, and now I will spend every moment I have making sure your light never dims. They held each other as the moons moved across the sky. Outside, the stars turned slowly in the endless black, and somewhere in the universe, other species looked toward thee and wondered why such an ancient and powerful empire had bound itself to humanity. They wondered how creatures so fragile could be worth so much. In time, they would all learn the answer. They always did.